So today's shiur is actually from last week's parsha, and I initially wasn't going to give it for this, and I realized it's like very, very Lomdeha Seminar-y type topic. Yeah, okay. So the title is
a case study in
Lo Tachmod, a case study in how the Torah commands emotions. Okay, and the goals are, I'm not sure. It's going to be very easy to get sidetracked. So we'll see how much we want to get sidetracked. Present my understanding of how the Torah does and doesn't command emotions. Okay. Second is to examine and explain the theory as applied to the mitzvos Lo Tisaveh of Lo Tachmod, don't covet, and Lo Tisaveh, don't desire. Okay, because those are like the ones that seem to be most like commanding emotions. And then we're going to look at the Ibn Ezra, Ralbag, and Rambam. And this is a weird case where I don't know whether it's a three-way machlokes or whether they all completely agree. Okay, yeah. I mean, there are definitely differences, but in terms of our central question, I don't know whether they agree or not. And then if we have time, we'll discuss other examples of where the Torah seems to command us in emotions, and then we'll explain it based on the theory. Okay, so here's the theory. Okay, and I might have talked about this over the years, but I don't know if we've ever talked about it as a topic. So my theory is that the Torah never commands you to feel or not feel a specific emotion, or to acquire or remove a specific midah. Okay, and by midah here we just mean like a character trait. The Torah only commands you to do or not do a physical or cognitive act. Cognitive being an act of mind, physical being an act of body. And all the mitzvos that seem to command you in emotions or midos are actually commanding you in specific actions which aim towards an emotion or a midah, but they don't command you, the Torah doesn't command you directly to feel an emotion or to have a midah. Okay, that's the theory.
And is this talking about like ignoring kedoshim to you, or like some extra things?
Oh, good question. So when I say mitzvos, I mean taryag mitzvos and halacha. Okay. Now, so kedoshim tihu depends on who you ask. Okay, Rambam says that that's not a mitzvah. That's telling you to go beyond, or that's talking about all the mitzvahs, or it's telling you to go beyond the mitzvahs. And we will get to that. And really, what we do in Pirkei Avos of Lifnim Mishur Zadin and Chassid and beyond the letter of the law, that is relevant to this discussion. Okay, so when we get to the end, then if you ask the question again, I think I'll be able to answer it more specifically. Okay.
Can I ask like a preliminary question?
Yeah, sure.
That you might get to.
Yeah.
So when you say like cognitive act, like how could you separate what you think and what you feel?
Okay, so I'll give you an easy,
thoughts like leads feelings.
Okay, good question. That's also definitely going to be in the first answer we do, but just let me give you two examples of cognitive acts that you're familiar with. And there are not a ton of mitzvahs of the Torah that are cognitive acts, but well, you tell me, what would be a mitzvah that commands you in doing something with your mind?
Loving. I guess that's a feeling.
Yeah, that's a feeling, right?
Praying?
Okay, that's you are correct. Although praying, I think people do associate with behaviors as well, like saying stuff. But learning Torah, right? Learning Torah is definitely one where you're engaged in a certain mental activity.
It's more physical than mental, more active than
learning Torah.
Yeah. Like,
I mean, if you wave your arms around.
Do you mean like group learning? Is that what you're referring to? Like, if you're learning alone,
I feel like
it's
a purely thinking thing.
Right, you are. I mean, I'm not saying that you don't interact with people, but you can do it, just in your mind, like Elisha was saying.
Okay,
yeah,
sure.
And then Anochi Hashem Elokacha, the first of the Aseret Dibros, is having emunah in Hashem. Lo yeh lecha Elohim acherim al panai, not believing in other gods. That's an act of the mind. So those are examples that are not in the gray area that you talked about. Those are areas where it's specifically to think or not think, or to believe or not believe in something. Okay, but we'll get to the gray area in the first answer we do. Okay, but first, let me show you where I got my theory from. This is not just my theory. I got this from the Ralbag. Okay, now starting off here, this is in the Ralbag's Intro to Torah. You'll recognize this is where the definition of Torah comes from, right? So he says that, and again, as usual, I'm going to read the. I am recording, right? Yeah. Okay, good. I am going to read just the English, but the Hebrew's up there. So this is out of context, but God did this by giving us the divine Torah, which is a regimen that brings those who practice it properly to true success. What they're saying, in case you can't hear, i.e. knowledge of God to the extent that's possible. It's funny, he doesn't actually say that here. He said that in a different work of the Ralbag. So I inserted that in because it is his definition. Yeah, he says true success is knowledge of God to the extent possible. Okay, but then this part I don't think we've talked about. No, what am I saying? We did talk about it also, but just not inside. Insofar as the objective of Torah is the one we have just outlined, meaning since the Torah is trying to get you to knowledge of God, its topics will of necessity be divisible into three elements. So there are three parts of Torah, okay? Part number one, the first element, mistakenly thought of by many as the entire objective of the Torah, are the mitzvos, which encompass what we have been commanded to believe and do, as well as what not to believe and do, okay? So that's where I get the fact that mitzvos are, if you look at it in Hebrew, shnitstavinu laha'amino, to believe, and la'asoso, and to do. And under belief, I understand to mean all cognitive actions where you're directing your mind towards a certain result. Okay, these are the 613 mitzvos according to the popularized numbering. Side point, because remember, Ralbag does not hold that there are 613 mitzvos. Controversy, right? Okay, yeah. All right, so that's number one. And what was it?
Sorry, no, it's
okay. So he says most people think that all of Torah is just the mitzvos or just halacha. Okay, this is what we call halacha. All right. Two, and this is the one we're focusing on. The second element encompasses the wisdom of ethics, and he calls it chachma hamedinis, which literally means the wisdom of like the society. But what he means by it is ethical perfection, interpersonal relations, stuff like that. Not interpersonal relations, personal ethics. And you'll see what he means by his examples. He says this area is beyond the scope of command and prohibition, meaning the Torah does not try to legislate this through laws, because it presupposes a level of human perfection well beyond the capacity of the average citizen, which is possible in the Torah commandments. Meaning that it would be possible for the Torah to command you in these things, but only if you're on a really high level. And since most people are not on that level, the Torah does not try to regulate this through commandments. Now what? How so? So he gives really good examples, 3 examples. To illustrate, and you got to really imagine this to feel the example. Let us consider if the Torah were to legislate in the following: that we must not be angry except for what one ideally should be angry about, and even then only to the ideal measure of anger in the proper time and place. Right? So imagine you had Hilchos anger that wrote out in detail, you are allowed to be angry in exactly these scenarios, and then like only to this amount and like only this time, and you had to like follow those detailed halachos in the same way you follow like Hilchos Shabbos or like Hilchos Nida or Katris, right? Or perhaps that one should only be happy about what one should ideally be happy about, and even then only to the ideal measure of happiness in the proper time and place, right? Don't be too happy and don't be happy about this. And like if you get good news from your friend, you're like, hold on, and you look it up in your halacha book, wait, I got to find out,
You start smiling, you're like,
yeah, exactly. And you like start your stopwatch, like, too long, and I'm exaggerating these examples because that's how halacha regulate. That's what we mean by halachic regulation. Halacha is very detailed, know. And then this last example is kind of weird. Or perhaps that one should not strive to dominate someone except for someone whom one ideally should dominate, and even then to the ideal measure in the proper time and place and the like. I think so. You see from this example of what he meant when he said earlier, the wisdom of ethics. So anger is an emotion, but it's also a mita. It's also like a personality trait. Happiness is a particular emotion. It's also a personality trait. And then striving to dominate, I feel like, is much more of we think of it much more of a character trait, like aggression or dominance, But that's the area we're talking about. Okay, so what would happen if the Torah did try to legislate these things? What do you think would happen?
Suppress human emotions, and they'd like come out in different ways.
Okay, so either it would be, and I'm going to do quote, too successful in the sense that people obeyed these and like suppress their emotions, it would be unhealthy, right? It'd come out in unhealthy ways. Like if you hold in, we all know if you hold in your anger, it's going to come out somehow, right? And then what would the other option be? Like, so that's for people who could exercise that degree of self-control. But then what about all those people who don't exercise self-control?
And then they would just reject halacha.
Yeah, they would exactly. They would reject
and you
halacha.
can't learn, because if you set up a system where like it promotes a certain type of anger in this circumstance, like you could see that implicitly from the text. But if it tells you like directly how to do it, you're not really like learning anything.
Well, the purpose would not necessarily be to learn stuff. It would be to regulate these emotions.
Right, but you don't achieve the same goal when you learn how to regulate those emotions.
I'm not sure I understand what you mean.
Like if you take the time to learn something, then you gain more than just it telling you to do something. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Yeah. And I think if it did regulate these things, you could have people who just did it behaviorally without thinking, and then you could have people who like do learn more about themselves, and do it. But you're right. It would just be like robotic in that sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Take away from like the uniqueness of people and like learning. If you wouldn't have your own like emotional.
Yeah, that's also true. That is also true. Although the thing is it's interesting. The argument that Ralbag makes is before we go back, the argument I would have made is, so you're making a good argument. I would have made another good argument, which is it would be impossible to write a Shulchan Aruch for all emotions. It'd be like it would be too detailed. Like you could have a total Hilchos Shabbos and like say what actions are. I just think you can't really write out or legislate. It would be impossible to do. But Ralbag gives Elisheva's answer. All people would be in a constant state of sin, okay, except for a very small population. Excellences of this variety should not be in the domain of command and prohibition. And then he says what Elisheva says, as it will lead people to be lax with the fulfillment of the other commandments once they see that it is impossible to fulfill many Torah commandments.
Right.
So they'd be like, I'm violating all the halachas of anger and sadness and happiness. I'm basically a sinner, and like then they're gonna just not keep halacha.
But they can't even feel that way because they can't.
Oh no! Yeah, that's gonna be a really unhealthy downward spiral. That's true. It's true. Okay. So that's the second category. And then just for the sake of completeness, even though we're focusing on this one, I'll just show you the third category. Oh, sorry, no, forgot one step. Therefore, so does this mean God doesn't care about emotions? No. Therefore, the Torah guides us in this area through accounts of individual members of earlier generations who were known for their perfection, along with some of their despicable actions and their consequences, so that we distance ourselves from doing such actions. So so God cares about midos and emotions, but he doesn't legislate them. He gives us role models to emulate and bad role models to distance ourselves from.
Is this what you meant by case study, or were you referring to something else?
I'm referring to something else. Yeah. Although I didn't realize you could double as that. Yeah, the Torah does it through case studies. Yeah. So in other words, this way, what you could do is you look at like someone with good midos, like name someone in Tanakh who had good midos. Moshe, right? Humility, right? Anava. So instead of legislating all the halachas of Anava, you look at examples where Moshe Rabbeinu had Anava, and you at your own speed and on your own pace, like aspire to those midos, but the Torah doesn't say be humble, as a mitzvah. Yeah. All right. Now the third category, which we're just doing for the sake of comprehensiveness, is the third element includes what the Torah grants us of the wisdom of the universe, which cannot be attained through human research except through great difficulty, if unaided by the prophetic accounts that guide us to this apprehension. So basically ideas about reality that would either be difficult or impossible to get without Torah. So for example, easiest example is the fact that the universe was created. When did the scientific community arrive at the conclusion that the universe had a beginning? Approximately when in history?
1900.
1900s. Okay, right? So it took thousands of years to arrive at that through natural study, whereas we have known that because the Torah told us that. Okay, so just a summary of the Ralbag here. The Torah regimen has three components. Mitzvos, which is commanding us to do or not do physical or cognitive acts. 2, midos, guiding us to develop good character traits and emotions or distance ourselves from bad character traits and emotions as taught by accounts of individuals. And then side point, if the Torah attempted to legislate our emotions and character traits, it would be too difficult for most people. And then since they would be violating the laws, they would come to like disregard the rest of the Torah or be lax. And the third category is deos, is ideas. That teaching us ideas about reality, the universe, God, that would be difficult or impossible to attain with our own minds. Another example, by the way, is let's say like Mashiach. If we didn't have Nevuah that told us that there would be Mashiach, there's no way to figure out Mashiach from just studying the universe, or reward and punishment. Okay, so this is the premise here, okay? So now in light of this, we can appreciate the question, which is when the Torah says in the Aseret Dibros, Lo Tachmod beis re'acha, you shall not covet your fellow's house. Lo Tachmod eishes re'acha, v'avro v'amaso v'shoro v'chomoro v'chol asher le're'acha. You should not covet your fellow's wife, his manservant, his maidservant, his ox, his donkey, nor anything that belongs to your fellow. It sounds like it's saying, don't have this emotion. And how would you define covet?
Jealousy.
Okay, yeah, jealousy is. Do you differentiate between jealousy and covetousness? You don't have to, but anyway.
Desire.
Okay, so jealousy, desire, and covetousness we'll see are all related. Google defines it as to yearn to possess or have something. Okay.
Does Tachmod come from the same shortish as Hamud, like nice, pleasant?
So Hamud in modern Hebrew, I think is used as nice and pleasant, but in in biblical Hebrew, I believe it means strong desire. Like when Chava saw the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and bad, it was nechmad ha'etz lahaskil. Nechmad, like desirable. Yeah, so it does come from the same shorish. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so for example, the runner-up coveted the gold medal, right? Is that wanted the thing for themselves. Okay, so the question is, how can the Torah command us to not covet? All right, so we're going to see three answers. Have you ever done the Ibn Ezra on Lo Tachmod?
Probably.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay, it's one of the classic Ibn Ezras. Okay, so now this is where it's going to be possible to go far afield, and because of the time, I'm going to try to localize the discussion to this one question, and we can always explore the Ibn Ezra later. Okay, the other parts of it. So he says, he asked the question, many people are astounded by this mitzvah, wondering, how can a person not covet what is beautiful in his mind and whatever is desirable to his eyes? Actually, should have said heart, probably, for Levi's heart and mind, beautiful in his heart. Okay, so how can the Torah command this? He says, now I will give you an illustration, and really, this illustration is going to have a couple examples in it. Okay, it's one mashal, but he has three examples, and we have to keep the three in mind. Okay, know that when a peasant man, a villager, kfari, like a person of a village, of sound mind, meaning he doesn't have any like mental disorders, sees a beautiful princess, he will not covet her in his heart, desiring to sleep with her, because he knows that this is not possible.
Oh,
Yeah, you heard this one? Yeah. Okay, now, and obviously I'm going to read the whole thing first, and then we'll go back. Do not think of this peasant as one of the insane people who desires to have wings to fly through the sky, for this is not possible. Just as a person doesn't desire to sleep with his own mother, even if she is beautiful, because he has been habituated from youth to know that she is prohibited to him. Now that's half of the sentence. Okay, so let's think about these three examples really quickly. Okay, what would be the modern day? We don't really have peasants and princesses so much anymore. So what would be the modern day analogy of this? Celebrities. Okay, right. So he's saying an average guy is not going to covet a celebrity to want to sleep with her. Now, you can ask a question and say, well, what do you mean? Like, people fantasize about celebrities all the time. So what do you think?
They shouldn't.
Okay, so one answer is to say that yeah, they shouldn't do that, and that's why the Torah says this. But then if you look at this bird example of like, he doesn't say bird, but if he says, look at the Hebrew here. Al tachshov zeh kfarishu kechan min hamushugaim. Right? Don't think that this guy is insane, such that he desires to have wings to fly in the sky, because this is not possible. Now, we've all had fantasies and dreams and daydreams of, it would be really cool if I could fly. Is that what he's saying? Like, or is he saying something else? Is he saying that if we have those, fantasies, we're insane?
I think it's saying like within the realm of possibility. Like,
yes.
Stray away from fantasizing, because it could become reality. Like if you made it happen.
Okay, so I think the key phrase here is in the realm of possibility, meaning we have like daydreams of like, it'd be really cool to fly, but no one that I know, and if you know this, then like we have to talk. No one I know looks at birds and is just like burning with jealousy and like how dare they have the wings? Why didn't God give me wings? It's like, if you are thinking about it in a sense that is within the realm of possibility, that in my mind is different than just like daydreaming or fantasizing. And same thing I think with the celebrity is that, yeah, people fantasize about sleeping with celebrities, but they don't actually like think that it is a real possibility in the sense of they're like actively pursuing or like being unhappy in their life because they can't have that one celebrity. And the people who do that are mishugaim in the sense of like have a mental disorder. Like the example that comes to my mind is why Ronald Reagan was assassinated, or not, he wasn't assassinated, why the assassination attempt happened? I believe, yeah. It was a guy. Do you know who Jodie Foster is? She's an actress, really, really, really good actress. This guy had an obsession with Jodie Foster, and somehow, he must have had a mental illness. And in his mind, like something was like, I have to assassinate the president in order to impress her so that she'll be with me. It's like that's, I think when he says Meshuga, he means like Meshuga. So I think what he means is like, yeah, the farmer might like the peasant might look at this princess and be like, oh, if only I could marry a woman as beautiful as she, but he's not going to be like trying to claw his way into the palace. Okay. And you can look at a bird and be like, oh, it's so cool to fly, but you're not going to like be burning with jealousy. And then here too, this one is a different dimension, which is that, and this is more psychological and especially Freudian, right? But but like, people just don't have this emotion of like wanting to sleep with their mother unless they have some sort of mental disorder or like abuse or whatever. Yeah.
I don't really see the distinction between the three. Or I see the
So,
first and the second.
Yeah, first. Oh, so the first and the second in my mind are in the same category. Third one is he's adding a new element. Is he's saying he's been hirgiluhu mina urav. He's been like accustomed from his youth or habituated from his youth to know that she's usher to him.
Okay.
Meaning, like, let's say you had a case, and this happens sometimes. I mean, it's unfortunate, but let's say like brother and a sister are adopted, and they don't know that they're brothers and sisters, and then they fall in love, and then like
It happened.
What?
It happened.
Yeah. It's and so in other words, it's not like the only thing that the only reason why they do that is because they just don't know that they are brother and sister. If they knew, then they wouldn't even have the desire, Yeah.
So it's like one is you don't know. Actually, one is from birth. One is it's kind of just like societal, like it's impossible. One is like natural, it's impossible.
Yeah, I think that's a good distinction, right? So this one is societal, right?
Right.
The princess example, the wings is naturally, it's not possible, and then the mother thing is like from your upbringing and from you're raised that way. Okay. So now he uses this to explain Lo Tachmod. So too, every rational person knows that a beautiful wife and money are not found by a person through his own wisdom and knowledge, but only as apportioned to him by Hashem. Koheles said he will give him his portion, meaning God will give him his portion, and the sages said. And this is, I'm going to read the Aramaic here. That a person's life, children, and sustenance are not dependent on merit, but on mazel, which back then was the laws of nature. Okay, they literally means constellations. So, and by the way, just to clarify, when he says apportioned by Hashem, it's not clear whether he means hashgacha pratis or hashgacha klalis. Here it sounds like hashgacha klalis because he's saying it's dependent on mazel and not zchus. Right, zchus is merit. Okay, but then later on, he's going to go on and say now, because of this, the rational person will not be envious and not covet. Once he knows that his friend's wife is prohibited to him by Hashem, she will be more out of reach in his eyes than the princess in the heart of the peasant. Therefore, he will be sameach b'chalko, content with his portion, and will not take it to heart to desire and covet what doesn't belong to him. For he knows that whatever Hashem decided not to give him, he will not be able to acquire through his might, his plan, and his strategies. Therefore, he will trust in his creator to sustain him and to do what is good in his eyes. Okay, now, the part that we're not going to talk about now is what does he mean that Hashem gave it to his friend and therefore he's not going to desire it? Like, let's say, for example, my neighbor has like a really like, nice farm, okay? And like, I want to work really hard in order to buy it from him, okay? So am I supposed to say, well, Hashem gave it to him, he didn't give it to me, so I shouldn't try? Like, there's a bunch of like what are the implications of what he's saying here? Okay, so that's the question we're not going to deal with. But in terms of our question, what is the Ibn Ezra's answer to how the Torah commands us not to covet? Like, what is his interpretation of that mitzvah?
If we change our view of reality and we get a correct view of reality, then naturally we just won't. Exactly,
right? So the Torah's commanding us to change our thoughts, and then when your thoughts change, your emotions change. And there is a modern school of psychology or method of psychology that is built on this. CBT, right? Cognitive behavior therapy, which is changing your thoughts in order to change your emotions. And again, this is like an example of how Judaism and a couple of other and Stoicism and like certain areas of Greek philosophy have known this for a very long time, but now it's actually being developed into a way to actually treat lots of mental illnesses, which is change your thoughts and then your emotions will change. But if you try to change your emotions directly, that doesn't work. Okay, so that's Ibn Ezra's answer. All right. Any questions on this one? Okay. Next, Ralbag. Okay, now Ralbag's is very different, and as we read it, see if you can spot the difference. Okay. The concept of coveting is that a person strives to make the possession his own. For instance, by giving money to his fellow in an effort to persuade him to divorce his wife so that he can marry her. Okay, which sounds really messed up, and it is. But think about an experiment that you would conduct on the street, and I really wonder what this would be like. Go to a person on the street, like average person, not necessarily Jewish, but say, you know the statement, every person has their price.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, how much money, like,
yes, people
oh, they have done
this.
this.
I've
Yeah.
seen videos.
How much money, like, could I give you to divorce your wife? So you're gonna find a point, I think, for most people where they'll do it. So like that's what he means. Or, and these examples are easier, or sell him his manservant, maidservant, ox, donkey, or any of his possessions. Okay, that's easier to think of. Now, so first of all, we see what is one difference so far about how he's defining coveting. An action, right? Ibn Ezra didn't even talk about like striving to make it his own. He didn't use those terms, but it gets even clearer now. He says, first he explains why it's bad, because it is a very bad character trait to strive to remove your fellow's property from his ownership unless he of his own volition wants to sell them and remove them from his possession. And we've already learned, here's where he says it clearly, that coveting is not in the heart alone, but that it involves an action.
Okay.
Yeah, from what the Torah said. So this is a pasuk about avodah zarah. Lo Tachmod kesef v'zahav alehem v'lakachta lach. Do not covet the silver and gold that is on them, meaning on the idols, and take it for yourself. So you see that coveting is associated with taking. And for this reason, I'll read in Hebrew, Lo yihiye over alav zeh im lo asa ma'aseh ba'ofen sheyihi lo hadavar shiachmod. A person does not transgress this prohibition unless he does an action to take possession of the object he covets. Okay? So here, what's his answer to the question clearly? How does the Torah command us not to covet?
Don't take any action.
Yeah, is that although the Torah is trying to distance us from a midah or a bad emotion, we only violate the mitzvah when we act on it. Okay, so again, this is an example of how the Torah can direct us towards emotions, but it's going to behaviorally codify it if it's going to legislate it.
So are you saying with the Ralbag that he's saying actions will cause your emotions to change?
He's saying that the Torah, if the Torah wants to distance us from a bad midah, it will do so through regulating our actions. So in other words, if you did covet and you took people's things, or you like gave people money to force them to sell it, so then that would strengthen the bad midah of covetousness.
Okay.
So the Torah prohibits you from doing that.
Oh God.
Yeah. Okay. But there's a problem. Okay. The problem is I mentioned that there's two mitzvos we're going to look at: Lo Tachmod and Lo Tisaveh. Now, Lo Tisaveh is in the second Aseret Dibros in Va'eschanan. So here's the in the Aseret Dibros here: Lo Tachmod eshes re'achav Lo Tisaveh beis re'acha sadehu va'avdo va'amaso shoro v'chom v'chol shoro re'acha. So you should not covet your fellow's wife. You should not desire your fellow's house, his fields, his manservant, his maidservant, his ox, his donkey, or anything that belongs to him. And that sounds like it's saying don't desire it. Okay.
Right.
Now, pause for 1 second. Ibn Ezra, and this is its own set of problems. Ibn Ezra says, like, there's all these famous questions about like the differences between the two Aseret Dibros. Ibn Ezra says, okay. He says, Chachamim only worry about preserving the ideas, but not the exact words. And like Lo Tisaveh and Lo Tachmod are basically the same thing. Okay, so he kind of ignores this question. All right. Okay. But the Ralbag would seem to have to confront it because it's using a new word. And what would be, according to him, what would be problematic interpretation of Lo Tisaveh?
Action.
An emotion, right? Problematic would be an emotion. But if he interprets it as an action, then we're still good in terms of our theory.
Why?
Because he seemed to say earlier that the Torah does not regulate emotions. So, meaning Lo Tachmod, we said, isn't that regulating an emotion? Answer is no, it's an action. Lo Tisaveh, if we look at his commentary and he says it's an emotion, then that's a problem for the Ralbag. But if he says it's an action, then that's fine.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah. I think you got it. I think the word.
But I thought he was the one who said thoughts, though.
Yeah, thoughts, but desire is not a thought. Desire is an emotion.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see what he says. Behold, if the desire is in the heart alone, even though one did not do an action, then he has violated another commandment. Uh-oh. As it is mentioned in the Mishnah Torah. Now, here Mishnah Torah is not the Rambam's book. It's the nickname for Devarim. Do not desire your fellow's house, his field, his manservant, his maidservant. Behold, included in this prohibition here is what we have said, do not covet, because it is not possible for a person to guard against coveting unless he guards against desiring his fellow's house, for desire leads to coveting. So this is one of the rare cases where the Torah itself has a geder, right, as a fence, that really the Torah wants to prevent you from coveting, but to make sure you don't even get near coveting, it also says don't desire. And he says desire is in the heart alone. Okay, now this is his commentary on the first Aseret Dibros. Let's look at his commentary on the actual Dibra Hamaskeh Lo Tisaveh. do not desire. He says, behold, desire is in the heart alone. Again, he says, behold, the difference between coveting and desire is that desire is in the heart alone, whereas coveting involves taking measures to acquire the object that was desired and acting on that plan. For example, forcing the homeowner to sell his house or his field or whatever he desires. He may do this by bringing people to ask him in a manner that he can't refuse or things like that. So, problem. So again, we add here that Lo Tachmod is only violated when you act on it, as opposed to Tisaveh, Tisaveh, which is in the heart alone, even without an act. And this raises the question, how can the Torah command us to not desire?
Right.
And the Ralbag, I have not seen an explanation from him that answers this. Okay. So here we go to our superhero, the Rambam. Okay. So we're going to look at the Rambam in the laws, in his definition of Lo Tachmod, which is slightly clearer than the Ralbag's, and then also Lo Tisaveh. Now, I don't know how well you know the sections of the Mishnah Torah, but where would you expect him to codify Lo Tachmod and Lo Tisaveh? Deos, right? Which is the laws of character traits, okay? Interestingly enough, he puts it in the laws of Gazela and Aveda, in the laws of robbery and lost objects, okay? Because he says that Taiva leads to Chemda, which leads to Gezel, which leads to thievery. Okay, so here's what he says. One who covets the manservant, maidservant, house, or possessions of his fellow, or anything that is possible to acquire from him. And now here's his clear definition. And who peer pressures him and insists until he acquires the object from him, even if he gave him a lot of money, this person violates a negative commandment, as it is stated, you should not covet. Now, this is very not capitalistic, okay? Because in America, what we say is if it's a sale, it's a sale. And if let's say I go to you, right? Let's say I want your car, right? And and you don't want to sell your car, and I just keep on pressuring you and badgering you, and I get like Elisheva and Ayala, because I know that you're subject to peer pressure from them. You know, I get them to come and like say, come on, like how can you turn that down? And then you're like, okay, fine, I'll sell it. So in America, we would say that that's a completely legitimate sale. I might be a jerk, but it's a legitimate sale. In halacha, that's usur. Right. Even though I'm legitimately buying it from you, but because you didn't want to sell it on your own, and I'm kind of like forcing you to sell it, even though I can't actually force you to, that's Lo Tachmod, okay? And then he says something which looks like a contradiction. We do not administer, are you familiar with the phrase?
Lav she'ein bo ma'aseh.
Say again?
That one? Lav she'ein bo ma'aseh.
Yeah, Lav she'ein bo ma'aseh. Nice.
This
Right.
is my favorite.
Oh, yeah, right. So Lav she'ein bo ma'aseh is what?
A no that has no action.
Yeah, a lav means no, but it means in this context,
A prohibition.
a prohibition, right? Prohibition has no action, right? And the rule about punishments and a lav she'ein bo ma'aseh is
You can't get whiplashes.
you cannot get whiplashes. Nice, good.
I used to think whiplash. Wait, no. I used to think
Lashes and whiplashes.
whiplash was lashes.
Yeah. It's funny, if you ever see the English translations of it, they translate it as sometimes as stripes, which I guess was an old way of using it, because like when you get yeah, but I always think it's weird to translate as stripes. Like you get stripes. It sounds like a sort of like sticker that you give out to kids.
Where she changes like body
Yeah.
color.
Yeah. So I translate as whiplashes. Okay, so he says now, we do not administer whiplashes on this prohibition because it doesn't.
Whiplash.
Yes.
What's the difference between lashes and whiplashes?
Same thing. I also, I write whiplashes because if you just said lashes, you think like eyelashes, you get lashes,
Okay,
What's the lashes of rebellion?
Yeah, that's Makas Mardus. Yeah.
Oh my god.
That's for Dirabanans, and Malkus is for Deoraisas.
But it's the same thing, like you're hitting
Same
them?
thing, yeah. There might be some differences in kulas and stuff, but it's the same thing. All right. We do not administer whiplashes on this prohibition because it doesn't involve an action. One does not transgress this prohibition until he takes the object he coveted. As it is said, do not covet the silver and gold upon them and take them for yourself, implying that one only transgresses for a coveting that involves an action. So what's the problem?
They didn't do an action.
Yeah.
Can't give someone a whiplash.
So here he's saying on the one hand, you cannot get malchus for Lo Tachmod because there's no action, but you only violate it when you do an action. So is this a lav she'ein bo ma'aseh or not?
If you take action,
But-
you get punished.
No, you don't. Let's go over the facts. Let's go over the facts, and then you'll see the glaring contradiction.
Okay.
So, if I just covet in my heart, then I don't violate Lo Tachmod. I only violate Lo Tachmod when I take the object or buy the object or acquire the object. Okay.
Right.
Now, even when I violate it, I don't get whiplashes or lashes. Okay. Because I didn't do an action.
Maybe it's the intention.
Hold on a second. But we just said that you only violate it when you do an action. So is this a lav she'ein bo maaseh or not? On the one hand, it seems like it's not because you don't get whiplashes. On the other hand, it is a lav. It seems like a lav she'yesh bo maaseh because you only violate it when you do an action. So it's a blatant contradiction.
Right. I feel like
Yeah, but do everyone see the
Yeah,
contradiction?
yeah,
Or okay,
yeah.
all right. If not, yeah. So what is the answer?
that by doing the actual prohibition, which is the internal emotion, it leads to the action.
Very close. Very close.
I would say intention, like type of thing. Like if when you're taking it, like you're making it clear that it's because you desire it and you think that you deserve it. Like maybe it's something like that. Like you
Okay.
say it verbally.
I don't think so. Although I would not be surprised.
I feel like she's saying the right thing though, that like actions display intention.
Yeah. Like you have
Okay.
to know your intention and
Yeah, like,
Okay,
it could be
yeah.
like if let's say I'm stealing from a really rich person,
Yeah.
then okay, everyone steals from them. But if let's say I'm going to my friend and specifically like trying to take her wife or trying to take
Yeah.
one small thing that she owns, it's clear that it's like
So
vicious.
I hear the distinction, and that's very halachic thinking, but I've not seen that reflected in the actual halachos. Like I don't see anywhere where they examine the intention or where it matters.
so it's just like a manifestation.
There
of
you
it.
go. Okay, good. So the answer is like, answer is like this: is that really the Torah is prohibiting chemda, which is the feeling, and that's why it's a lav she'ein bo maaseh. However, it only prohibits a certain degree of that feeling, which is where the feeling is so strong that you actually take the object from the person. So unlike, for example, there's a prohibition of murder, right? So what is the actual prohibition? It's the act of killing someone. It's not murderous intent. Okay, it's the act. Whereas here, it's not the act of taking the object is not usher. It's the feeling of chemda as measured by it's so strong that you take the thing. So that's
saying like punishable by Basin or just. Like,
so that's why it's not punishable by basting, because it is a prohibition on the feeling, but it's a degree of the feeling. It's only when you reach the degree where you actually take it. Okay.
But doesn't the whole concept of lav she'ein bo maaseh go against your whole theory?
No, because this is a lav she'ein bo maaseh, and therefore all lav she'ein bo maasehs are not punishable in basing.
It's still
Right.
a law. There's still Lo Tisaveh.
There's still Lo
Torah
Tisaveh,
commands
yeah.
us on it.
Yeah. Oh, you mean my theory?
Yeah, you're
Oh yeah. So my theory is that it is. I see what you're saying. Yeah. So maybe I should reword my theory. That what I meant to say is that it's all going to be behaviorally legislated.
so like
Meaning,
yeah, well,
right? Meaning that it's true that the Torah, according to this, is commanding you not to covet, which is a feeling, but it's not just an amorphous, undefined thing. It's concrete action or expression. Yeah.
but which is like how could your original question wasn't about whether the Torah legislates it. No, it was whether the Torah commands it.
Yeah, you're right. I could have made the question more specific and the theory more
Seems
specific.
kind of unnecessary because why does this matter?
Oh, that's what. So I'll address that at the end. Okay, for the takeaway message. But now let's see how the Rambam deals with Lo Tisaveh, don't desire. Okay, so he says, one who desires the house, wife, or possessions of his fellow, or anything that it is possible to acquire from him, once he plans in his here's the Hebrew keven shechashav belibo heach yikna. Once he plans in his mind how to acquire this thing from him, heach yikna mimeno davar zeh, v'nifte libo b'davar, and allows his heart to be seduced by the matter, or in Hebrew, nifte, like seduces himself, really, right, in this matter. Then he has violated a Torah commandment, as it is stated, do not desire, and desire is only in the heart alone. So it's not just wanting what your friend has.
Planning.
It's planning and then becoming seduced, or I think we have a better word that we use for obsessed, okay, right? So,
Stalker.
yeah, like a stalker, right?
Mhm.
So the Rambam says, do not covet prohibits us to engage in a degree of covetousness to the point where we engage in a physical act, i.e. taking or buying the object. Do not desire prohibits us to engage in a degree of desire to the point where we engage in a cognitive act, which is obsessive planning. And this is addressing your question, Elisha, from before, and also the Ibn Ezra, which is that it's true that there is a relationship between thoughts and feelings, but according to what we've seen here, the Torah will legislate what you should and shouldn't think about with the aim of like producing or prohibiting certain feelings, preventing certain feelings. But it's not just saying feel or don't feel. It's saying think in a certain way or take on a certain perspective in order to change your emotions, which I realize is going to lead to your question that you just asked, which is what difference does it make, which I'll get to in one slide.
So what is Rambam adding, like how much coveting?
Well, the Rambam's adding that the Ralbag didn't say is Lo Tisaveh. Ralbag just said it's in the heart alone, but the Ralbag didn't explain. And Rambam's saying that it's not just desiring, it's planning and becoming obsessed with the plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
This could also be like a checkpoint for you, like if you're getting to the point where you're making plans to make it happen.
Yes, that's
and
true.
You know you're too far.
Exactly. Yeah. And that is a really good technique in general for dealing with your emotions, is drawing lines for yourself behaviorally, to see what, this is a common thing. Like when people are wondering whether they're addicted to something, what's the litmus test is, can I stop if I wanted to, right? And if you can't stop, then that means you're addicted, Okay, so the last thing we're going to talk about, really quickly, because we only have like 3 minutes. Other examples of this, where the Torah seems to be regulating your emotions, follow the same pattern. So I'm just going to walk you through really quickly. Love of God and fear of God is certainly aimed at producing emotions, but what is the ma'aseh ha-mitzvah in both cases? Learning about Hashem through the universe or through Torah, right? So that's the activity you're engaging in with the hopes and with the aim of producing these feelings. But the Torah is not saying feel love for God. It's saying engage in these activities with the hopes of arriving at that result. Okay, very similar in a way. I just thought of this example now. Peru or revu, right? Be fruitful and multiply. The Torah cannot actually command you, like Torah couldn't just say like have a male and female child, because you can't control that. But what it can do is it can say engage in the act of intercourse with your wife until you and keep on trying until like you produce offspring. V'ahavta l'recha kamocha and v'ahavta es hager we talked about earlier this year. So that sounds like it's saying love your fellow Jew and love the ger, but what is it really doing? Treat them in ways that are expressive of love or that are conducive to love. Mm-hmm. But if let's say you don't feel love for your fellow Jew, are you violating an Isser? No, right? It's action. Lo sisna ezachicha b'levavecha, don't hate your brother in your heart. I don't remember if we've ever discussed this. So the really quickly, let's say if Leah does something to upset me, okay, and I'm so upset that I refuse to talk to her. Once I get to that point, then if I continue to not talk to her, then I'm in violating this thing. But let's say I yell at her or insult her or punch her. So even though I still hate her, it's not in my heart. I've expressed it and I'm not violating this anymore. So really what it's telling you to do practically is don't hold hatred in your heart. You have to express it. Ideally, what would be the best, healthiest way is to talk to her about it. But yeah.
But also I think withholding is also an action, like the lack of. Yeah,
you're right. Yeah, exactly. All right. So last thing, takeaway message, because who cares? So first of all, Hashem does care about our mitzvos and our emotions. Okay, but due to human nature, He didn't legislate it through technical laws. He allows us to develop our mitzvos and perfect our emotions at our own pace by learning from the good and bad role models in the Torah, and that's very similar to Pirkei Avos, where each person takes it on their own. And when it seems like He's commanding us regarding a certain midah or emotion, if we understand it correctly, we see it's really governing our behavior, not our feelings. Even if the aim is for our feelings, or even if the target of it is a feeling, like Lo Tachmod is saying, don't have this feeling, but it's still behaviorally regulated. And then the who cares thing is really, to me, expressed in this pasuk in Mishlei. Its ways are ways of pleasantness and all its paths are peace. I think, let's one more in. I think that a lot of people put a lot of emotional pressure on themselves that they think that the Torah is demanding certain feelings of them, like for example, people there's like phrases in songs like mitzvah gdola lios b'simcha tamid, right? It's a big mitzvah to be happy constantly. No, it's not. Simcha is a value, it's a midah, it's something we strive for, but it's not a mitzvah to be happy constantly. Like God does not demand of us to have emotions, or let's say even, and there are even people who will like, even though like kibbud av v'em and mora av v'em, there will be people who will feel guilty because they don't like their parents, or because they like aren't, whatever. And they'll think that they're somehow, even if they don't think it consciously, they feel like they're violating Torah. And I think it is very merciful and peaceful that the Torah says, yes, it would be great if everyone loved their parents, but that's too much to ask of human beings. What the Torah does ask is that you treat your parents in certain ways. And if there's a love that develops, then that's great. But if not, you're not violating halacha, And I think like we just beat ourselves up a lot about not feeling or having midos that are in line with Torah, and we put them on the same level as technical halacha. And what the Ralbag is saying is like, no. Technical halacha is what everyone's obligated in. That's the derech ha'am. And like we have goals to develop good emotions, but that's not on, like, don't feel bad that you are not being happy all the time, or that you're not having, or that, yeah. So that's the takeaway is more of a practical thing in terms of like being easier on ourselves and realizing that Hashem is not making unrealistic demands when he says these things, because he's not obligating us legally to not be angry at people,
Right.
Yeah.
I think there's a benefit because it's funny, in and not regulating our emotions, it does regulate your emotions. Like this is how people like learn to regulate their emotions.
Yes, that's true. Right.
In their behaviors.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and showing you right, showing us the derech about how you can successfully take charge of your own emotions and develop them, just not through legislative action. Yeah.
Oh, Eliana's raising her hand.
Oh,
I think.
yes, Eliana. Unless you hit by accident.
Oh
Yeah.
We all do
Yeah.
it sometimes.
So,
Oh, sorry, that was an accident.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah. That's right. And just another example I think is relatable is I feel like parents do this with little kids a lot, of like trying to force them either overtly or implicitly to have emotions, of like to force them to be grateful or to like love their sibling, or and like I feel like that puts unrealistic pressure on, especially when kids can't control their emotions, like, so getting a kid to say thank you, that's a good habit. But to feel gratitude, like you should be grateful for this. Like no, don't try to like force your kids to have emotions. Like that's got to go at their own pace, and that's putting a lot of pressure on them. Like how can you get so angry? No. Yeah.
They don't understand emotions. You have to teach them.
You
have to teach them. They don't.
Yeah, and the other thing also is like that's what how good parents teach emotions. Like there's the technique you mentioned also, but it's really modeling. Right, is if you grow up with parents who are really good role models and they don't force you to do stuff to like feel certain ways, then I think that you got the best odds of having good emotions.
Yeah.
Alrighty, any questions? Obviously, this is a big topic.
Honestly,
yes.
I want to say that I agree that it's not the emotions. I think could be even more important in some sense than the actually your performance of the mitzvah technically.
Yes, 100%, because the mitzvos are aimed at producing these emotions. That's the end result. All the mitzvos, and in fact, in the Rambam's threefold division of mitzvos, midos, and deos, all the mitzvos aim at producing either deos or midos. So in that sense, yeah, midos are more important. Alrighty, that's it for today.
Thank you.
Have a good job, everybody.
You too.
Thank you.
Welcome.
It goes back to our discussion before about kids, God.